evening. Tonight's program will focus on the life of Ann T. Kent, who was one of 8 women inducted into the Marin Women's Hall of Fame earlier this year in 1988. She was the only woman of the 8 who was elected posthumously. And this evening we want to take a look at her life and the contribution she made to Marin County and find out a little bit about the kind of person she was. And to do that, we've invited her twin daughters to be with us in the studio tonight. To my immediate left is her daughter Nancy Danielson, and to my far left is Marty Kent. And I hope that you'll enjoy talking about your mom tonight. I think it's going to be fun for all of us.
I think it'll be fun.
Will one of you start and tell us a little bit about her early life, where she was born and all of that?
Well, she was born on Long Island, New York in 1892, and her mother had come from Ireland when she was 16 and married there in New York. And I think some of that Irish life,
pioneer spirit,
really became part of our mother's life.
I see.
And
Who was her father?
Her father was an engineer with the Long Island Railroad and worked for so many years they gave him a gold cane when he retired.
Oh my, not just a gold watch, but a gold
Right.
cane. Was he an Irishman too?
He was of Irish descent.
I see. Did your mother talk at all about her mother and father? Do you
Yes,
have-
we knew her mother well. She
Uh-huh.
came west later and lived with us, but we never knew her father. She really admired her father tremendously.
Was she close to her mother?
Very.
Very close to her mother. Where was she in the hierarchy of the family? Was she an only child, or did she have other children?
There were 2 sisters, and our mother was the older of the 2.
I see. What do you know about her early life? Do you, either one of you, want to chime in on that? What was her childhood like?
Well, I always think of one story that she told about going to school, and she always used to cut through a lot. And one day there was a goose there, and the goose just hissed at her, and she was very scared. She just stood there, and she said she thought about it for a while, and she decided the best thing to do is to go the long way to school. When she got to school, she was very proud of herself for getting there on time and no fear at all, and that really was a story that is her life. She might go the long way around, but she'd get there.
And she got there when she was supposed to.
Right,
Right. That's interesting. What kind of upbringing did she have? Did she live in, was she of wealthy parents, well-to-do parents, or was it hard for her, do you know?
I think her father worked very hard, and I think the time came when she decided she must go to work and decided she'd go to librarianship school, which was not too far from where they lived, and she became a children's librarian.
I see.
And I think that's where her first kind of role model might have come in, someone out of the family, because she really thought that head librarian knew what was right and how to go about it.
We now have your mother in her first job as a librarian. Do you know what happened after that?
One afternoon,
There's a story here.
somebody came by in a car and said, "There's been an airplane that fell down. Come." So my mother got in the car and went out, and I tell a story that it was a plane, Lindbergh, it was a Lindbergh's plane. I'm not sure that that's so, but it has made a good story at least. But it was an airplane, which was very rare. And there were some men there cleaning it up, and the oil was all over, and one of them was my father. So she met her to-be husband cleaning up an airplane spill.
For
That
heaven's sake,
crashed.
was he a flyer then?
He was a flyer.
Oh, and there weren't too many flyers in those days, so
No.
he was an adventurous spirit too.
He,
wasn't
yes, yes. He taught flying in World War I,
I see.
and he was in the Army then, which he was not aware of until they were married. And the day they were married, or as they were going to be married, the minister said, "Anne, are you sure it was not the glamour of the uniform?" She never saw him in uniform till the day they were married.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Well, what was he doing there? Was he living on Long Island?
He was sent, no, he was sent up to do something about this plane crash.
Oh, it was a plane crash.
Yeah.
It was a crash.
But they did, in those days, they weren't going that fast. They kind of
Or that
fell out of
high.
the sky. That's right.
Oh, they're doing it.
But they had to try to save the parts, and they knew each other not a terribly long time.
My goodness.
But I've come recently upon the telegrams where he sent it to her and said, "Anne, I'm so sorry. I can't make it on Tuesday for our wedding. The Army says I must wait 4 days more. I love you." And there were about 3 such telegrams. So they wanted to get married. And
Quite soon after
Yes.
they met. Where was he stationed, do you know that? Where
I
did the
think he was in
telegram-
Louisiana at that
Oh,
point.
for goodness sakes. My goodness, he flew a long way. And what was his name?
Thomas Thatcher Kent.
Thomas Thatcher Kent. I don't even have your mother's maiden name. What was that?
Thompson.
Ann Thompson. And Thomas Thatcher Kent. And they were married where?
They were married in Long Island.
Uh-huh.
And came immediately to the West.
Well, they headed for a honeymoon in Maine.
Oh, that's right.
Uh-huh.
And it took 4 days for the Army orders to catch up with my father, telling him that in 1 day he was to be in San Diego, California.
Oh, for goodness sake. He wasn't from California then originally?
It-
Or was
he was.
He was.
He was, but the Army, you see, was sending him to California
to San
then.
Diego. Uh-huh. So did they go to San
Oh, they
Diego?
brushed back to her home, picked up a few things, said goodbye to her mother, took a train where the military police greeted them and took him right off to the compound because he was AWOL.
Oh, what a wonderful start.
So she baked him pies and took them and passed them through the fence to him
Oh, for heaven's
at
sake.
Coronado.
Oh, for heaven's sake, that's wonderful. That was the beginning of their
That was their
married
honeymoon.
life. There you go. Well, I gather he wasn't incarcerated long, however.
No, I think it was a matter of a week or so.
I see, for goodness sakes. Well, then, was Thomas Thatcher Kent a member of the Kent family that founded Kentfield, or that settled Kentfield? Or
Yes, he was
I
the
see.
next to the oldest son.
I see. Well, we'll have to get that track going in a minute. But how long did they live in San Diego? And
It was near the end of World War I then.
I see.
They were there perhaps a year, maybe a year and a half, and then moved to Marin County.
I see. So she would have been about 25, 6, 7,
Seven,
something like that.
27
Uh-huh.
by then.
And then they moved to Marin County, and her real life began.
A long life.
I should say. And tell me about what she moved into. She moved into quite a commanding family, didn't she?
Yes, and I suppose when one moves into such a situation, you have no idea what you're getting into. You just sort of bend with the blows. And I think her father-in-law, who was Congressman William Kent, was at that moment trying to start an old settlers' day in Kentfield and kind of get the people of Italian and Basque origins and all nations together to kind of talk about why they came to Marin County, why they liked it, why they stayed. And so our mother, as a new true convert to California immediately, helped him on that and really had a chance to get to know him and to do things with him right away. Why she was the one that was thrown into it, I don't know, but she loved it. She really enjoyed that.
got her feet wet in Marin County activities right
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Well, and Congressman Kent, my grandfather, was working on to have Muir Woods accepted and to buy it. And there are many stories about people wondering why that should be and why why he was trying to save redwoods. And she once said, "Why do you bother, Dad? It's just so difficult to hear all these people say things about you." And he said, "Oh, Anne, don't ever worry about things like that. The people who are going to use Muir Woods aren't even born yet."
He was so right, wasn't
And
he?
and she realized a very long view of compassionate action for nature and people.
So she probably learned that from him. It doesn't sound as though that had been her track earlier in life.
I think he expanded any views she had.
Yeah.
She certainly was a kind and very thoughtful person, and I believe that it took on another level.
Tell me how they lived. My vision of the Kent family was that it was sort of that the whole family kind of lived together in a satellite situation. Am I right? Or, I mean, did your parents live independently of the congressman and had their own home, or?
Yes, they lived, they built a little house, a little area in San Anselmo,
Oh, they were that far away.
that far away.
Okay.
Then they moved to Ross, and some of the brothers and sisters did live in Kentfield.
And there were gathering times when they all would get together on Sundays so that they learned to know each other and like each other very much.
And your father, what business did he enter when he got out of the service?
He went to the UC Berkeley School of Mines and thought of going into mining, but then decided that was not for him, and he went into real estate.
I see. And your mother's life with him was to be a wife, or was she immediately, as well as being a wife, a civic figure? I know she had a long record of contributions in the county.
Well, I think she just started immediately. I don't think there was any pause, because certainly by the early 1930s, she was founding all kinds of things, and I think had been busy with her father-in-law on various things in the 20s, and well, the whole Marin County library system came up in the 20s. So that's what she was doing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
That's right.
When the library tract got back, she did not go back and work as a librarian, did she? Or
No, she never went back and worked as a librarian, but I think someone said to her one time, probably about the early mid-20s, do you realize that your county has no county library? And she knew at that point that it had, I think, 4 or maybe 5 city libraries. But she felt it was very important to have a free public library system. And so she went and talked to the supervisors about it.
What an uppity female.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And I don't know, I suppose there were the same number of supervisors then as now, but there were 2 who said, no, we don't have any money to spend on books. We can't spend money on books. We have roads to build and there's sewers to build. And one of them said, and anyway, all the dairymen are so tired, they go to bed early and they get up early and they don't need any books. And she thought that was not right. And so she got a friend of hers who actually had moved here just the year before she had, to go with her and cover the county and talk to them. And so 18 months later, those 2 supervisors were not reelected. And 2 men who believed that we ought to be spending money on books and libraries were elected.
So this was kind of, she really shook the trees on this one. She really
She
took
worked
off.
within the
I
system,
see, uh-huh.
but she really went out and did the
Oh,
legwork.
I'll be darned. And who wants to pick up the story? Did they,
She can,
Well,
did they then create the system?
by, I think it was 1926,
Uh-huh.
the Marin free library system was started.
Well, I get a picture of a woman that knew her own mind then from the beginning. She wasn't merely following in the footsteps of Congressman Kent. She was a woman who knew her own mind.
Absolutely, and you
Uh-huh.
see, being a librarian, she went straight to the field she knew and saw a hole that needed filling.
Where do you suppose that kind of confidence came from, that kind of desire to lead? Do you think it was her passion for libraries, or?
I think she just knew how to do things, and once you learn how to do something well, I mean, even if it's passing the goose on the way to school.
Yes, I was going to say, and knowing that you'll get there if you...
If she practiced arguing the goose. She was always very, it was as if there would be a moment and when someone would confront her, and it was as if she'd dip into the truth immediately, and there never was a hesitation. She'd come right up with the answer. Things that other people would be afraid to say if you tried to censor, but there was nothing ever wrong with what she said. It was just that she said it spontaneously and truthfully. It was great.
She sounds wonderful.
It was embarrassing as a child for a while.
And I think to some of her friends, too.
Oh, really? Oh, really? She was a very...
It was, yes, and it was always,
straightforward and
and it was always the right thing, you know, if you could remove yourself a little bit, but it took me a little while to know how to remove myself from that.
Well, now, when did you come into her life?
In that year.
In the same year of the library? You and the libraries
That was
grew
too
up
much.
together. The libraries aren't doing as well as we hoped. How are you doing?
Yeah, just fine. We'll have to work on the libraries.
Do you have some recollections of growing up as her child? I've already heard Marty say that sometimes there were moments of embarrassment because she was so outspoken. Was she a very hands-on mother? I mean, did she have lots of lessons she wanted to teach you, and what kinds of, what was your relationship with her?
Well, I think she was, in many ways, a hands-on mother, and yet, let's see, where did that come from? The saying that, oh, she was always walking out the door.
Oh, yes. The wonderful housekeeper that we
Oh,
had
that's
for
right.
so many years responded when somebody said, how did you think about your mother? Did you think about her as other people did? And the housekeeper said she was always walking out the front door.
Because she did have causes.
Always.
Yeah.
She always had.
And we had each other. We didn't need anybody else.
Yeah.
Was she did she talk to you at all about your duties as a Kent, or as a young woman, or as a female, or anything like that? Did she have lessons she wanted?
I don't remember being taught in that way, but certainly non-directive.
Yeah, she modeled
I,
much more than she did speak directly to what was going on. And but she did always use the word kind and thoughtful.
she did.
It was amazing how, now that I think back on it, it would be woven into many, whether she's talking about somebody at the grocery store or what, but that was a value, a baseline.
Now, after the war, what happened? Did your father?
Then we moved, after the war, we moved to Kentfield, and that was, actually, we lived in Kentfield during the war. And actually, because there was housing shortage then, we were moving back and forth.
Oh, that was, yes, that was...
That was unreal.
They bought a house 4 months before the war started. And then when Marin ship started, they said, we need homes for our executives. So our parents, instead of moving into their home, rented it to a Marin ship executive. And we moved 7 times in 3 years, from the old Kent barn to the big old estate house.
During the war, she was very strongly loyal to the Red Cross, so much so
the
that they
Motor
honored
Corps.
her. She
Oh,
was
yeah.
Motor Corps. They honored her at the end of it.
Uh-huh.
I think we still have the Red Cross coat she wore.
Oh, my gosh. I didn't know that about her, the Red Cross part.
Yeah.
She has a reputation in the county as having been a strong environmentalist, and certainly we've already talked about a little bit about how she might have started that way, having talked and argued maybe a little bit with Congressman Kent. When did that begin to manifest itself? Early on, or did she become more active in that field?
I think gradually. One of the earliest things I remember were little stickers in the shape of the state of California saying, "I favor products not advertised on the highways of California."
Oh, the anti-billboards?
Way
Oh.
back,
that was-
because she'd say, "Look at the
That was in the 30s,
hillside,"
yeah.
and ever after that, it was kind of that relationship of what she could see and how the hills were
Yeah.
useful for many aesthetic purposes as well as...
And it did all tie in, you know, all of horticulture is really conservation. So you can't just say, I'm a garden person and I'm a conservation person. It ties in. And she was one of the founding members of the Marin Garden Club. And they worked in both conservation and horticulture. And it was out of that the Marin Conservation League was started.
Oh, my.
And they were one of the founding groups of the Marin Art and Garden Center.
The Marin
Marin
Garden
Garden Club.
They were instrumental in starting both the Conservation League and
Yeah.
the Art and
Because there
Garden
were
Center?
people like Zephyr Evers and
Yeah.
Carolyn Livermore
Yeah.
and my mother and Gladys Smith, Mrs. Russell Smith.
Yes,
And
I remember them all.
And they were women, and Gracie Wellman, all of them, they were women of action.
They were, weren't they?
Yeah.
Gracie still is.
Oh, she certainly is.
So now the Art and Garden Center was founded when? Was that after the war? Or was
1945, I believe. It was when developers were beginning to show an interest
Oh, yes.
taking it over, buying it, and so the group got together and began to move on how to save it. And that took a lot of determination and money, too.
Well, had that been a private home or something
Yes.
in that area?
Jonathan Kittle home.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a lovely area now. And the Garden Club is, am I right, still part of that, or is it a separate?
The Marin Garden Club is a separate private club. It's the Marin Garden Society that meets there all the time.
I'll never get these
Right.
things right. There is a story that I've heard from other people about the Kent Island. Can you tell us about that? Your mother gave Kent Island?
Well, she had owned it for a long, long time and always wanted to hold it to be sure that no development would ever happen there. And then the harbor of refuge, the harbor district, became a reality and a strong one, and there was a plan made by Norman Gilroy, I think, as to how that whole island would be developed, and it would be dredged, and the spoils would be put up so that there could be restaurants there.
Now, this Kent Island, I should tell our viewers, is in Bolinas Lagoon, isn't that right, out
Right.
in West Marin?
It's mud flats.
Yeah, it's really just
Yeah.
a little mud flat.
How did she happen to own it?
She had owned another piece of property and traded it for this.
And she wanted to hold it against just such kinds of things
Yeah.
as were now happening. When was this that Norman Gilroy came up with the idea of developing that island? Was
In
it
the
lagoon?
late 60s.
Oh, was it that far along, the 60s?
I would think so, yes.
I know that I was up at the supervisors meeting and I heard it and I went home and I said, "Did you sell the island?" She said, "No." And I said, "Wait till you hear what I just heard." And I told her about it, and we immediately whipped into quick action and called the the Audubon Society and Stan
Nature
Pitcher and
Conservancy.
Nature Conservancy and Marty Griffin and worked out a potential for donating part of it and selling the other part so that it was possible for her to do it.
So she donated part of the land to the Nature Conservancy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And sold the
And
other-
sold the other
No.
half to the Nature Conservancy.
Oh,
It wasn't
not to a
balancing.
developer.
No,
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 no.
no.
So that she she made some money on it, but
Uh-huh.
she donated half the value of the whole island.
Well, that was wonderful. And did that stop development? then
Absolutely.
in
So the Nature Conservancy then immediately went to the Board of Supervisors, and they accepted the gift. It was close. There was question that morning, but they accepted it that morning,
They
and
accepted the gift, the county accepted the
Yes.
gift of the...
from the Nature Conservancy, because the
Oh.
Nature Conservancy had put down the money.
Mhm.
They could move quickly.
I see. So that became county open space, is that right?
Became county property
Oh, I
at that
didn't know.
point,
Uh-huh.
because you didn't want any governmental unit to be able to condemn it.
Mhm.
And if the county owned it, they wouldn't condemn
Oh, yes.
against another county unit.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And so it had to be done quickly, and there were lots of people showing interest in developing that island, and you could see what kind of a great commercial thing could have happened
Well,
there.
the whole movement, I know there was just an enormous amount of planning going on for what was going to happen to West Marin, and that must have been the first barrier to,
Yes,
to
and
all of that happening.
The highway was going to be widened just about that time. That was the next thing that we turned our
Uh-huh,
attentions
uh-huh.
to, I
Yeah.
think.
And she felt that Canyon Ranch was then saved, and those birds needed a place to feed. And if all that development was there in the lagoon, where would they feed?
The things that I knew of your mother from direct knowledge was the Oral History Project. Now, how did that come about? Who started that? Did she start
She
it?
started, I guess.
Okay,
She
well,
just...
tell us what it is and what she did.
Well, she felt that there were so many people in Marin whose stories were not being told, and she realized they had to be grabbed soon. And with this new technique of audio tapes, maybe they could get them down. And she had a younger friend who had just retired from work early and knew something about tape recorders, so she got her to do the driving and the taping, and they just went everywhere and interviewed people. And of course, nobody would dare to say to this 80-year-old woman, "No, I'm not going to talk to you."
She was 80 when she was doing this?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
She felt an individual could make a difference. And she not only proceeded to do that, but she would tell her friends that they could make a difference and that they should speak up and that they should take part, which was sort of fun to see, because as she did get older, as you mentioned, she got this freedom. She'd say, "Nobody's going to say no to an old lady like me."
Good for her.
And she would go through more friends in the Marin Garden Club and all over who would say, "All right, Nancy, let's get together. Let's start a campaign against pampas grass, because if we don't do it, your mother is not going to leave us alone." And so whatever the cause was, litter on the highway, pampas grass, getting all the signs, including real estate signs, political signs, off the Marin countryside, she would talk and talk and talk until these people would, they loved her. "All right, we'll help you out."